Hey, this is Delitra,
Hey, everybody, this is Angela,
and you're listening to Nutrient Sisters.
a podcast dedicated to helping you learn how to nourish yourself.
Welcome to another episode of Nutrient Sisters. So glad you all tuned into our episode today. My name is Delitra, and I'm here with my co host.
Hey!
In today's episode, we're breaking down mental health and therapy and how it relates to communities of color. So, one of the main issues we've identified is the stigma that's attached to receiving mental health services. The King MC Jay-Z went as far as to say that Black people are as scared as Black folks are of the cops, we're even more scared of therapists. That's a bold statement.
Real
Typically,
bold.
yeah, typically stigma acts as a deterrent from people seeking mental health care and when they actually need it. I can say personally, if I've also experienced this. Angela, can you share more about the stigma that exists in our society?
Yes, girl, there's a lot. For people of color, and when I say people of color, for those of you who don't know, I'm grouping people together. So Asians, Blacks, Native Indians, Latinos. Um, I'm kind of lumping them together. And I think sometimes people think that when you use the term people of color, that's only for Black people. But anyway, so for people of color, seeking help for mental health is such a sign of disgrace for a number of reasons. Although with more exposure, it is getting, kind of big on social media and things, and it is sort of changing. But for now, let's just talk about the stigmas. So, for one, it's seen as a sign of weakness, right? So people of color have had to overcome so many obstacles for thousands of years that the idea of not being able to handle a little quote unquote sadness is seen as being extremely weak. You have families whose parents came over here as immigrants with nothing in their pockets and they've sacrificed so much. You have communities where crime and drugs and things like that are at the forefront. You have wars going on, you have people starving, people fighting for their lives and their rights. And for many, the idea is that you can cope with this. Um, Everyone is suffering to some capacity, and so you should be able to pull yourself up by the bootstraps and cope with it. And that's a two-parter for this because um, there's that comparison factor, kind of like how we're taught to eat our food because people in Africa are starving. It's the
Mhm.
same for people of color in these communities. Like, look at everything going on and you're sad, like grow up. Um,
Yeah.
which kind of leads me to my next thing, right? So this ties in this idea that you have no right to really feel the way that you're feeling. Like, why are you depressed? Why do you have anxiety? How could you possibly be struggling with these things? Look at your life. Now, this concept is really for those families who are in higher socioeconomic status. But it's the idea that for people of color, especially when you're younger, you listen to what you're told, you do as you're told to do, and your thoughts and your feelings on any subject matter don't really matter, right?
Right.
So again, it kind of becomes this idea of like, just suck it up. I'm your parent and I know what's best for you.
Mm.
And I'll say this, depression and anxiety are not the only like mental health disorders that exist, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of the times the idea of something being quote unquote wrong with their child is also not going to fly in these households, right? So
Yeah.
for some of us, that then becomes this idea of like, well, what is wrong with me? And that's how that sort of begins to arise for a lot of us because we've never really been faced with the knowledge of what's going on with us mentally and emotionally. Um, and for those who kind of live in a religious household, And some of y'all know what I'm talking about when I say religious household, okay?
Yes, that's me.
The fear, yeah. The fear of God has been placed upon you as well, right? So
Yes.
just keep praying, God will get you through it, or, suicide is sinful and you want to go to heaven,
Yes.
and, and yada, yada, yada.
Oh my
So,
goodness.
right.
I can't tell you how many times I've heard that, like, just pray to God, or you can't kill yourself or you go straight to hell. And it's like,
Dang.
okay, well, I'm feeling like I'm in hell right now, so
Exactly.
what am I
No, but
gonna
that's
do?
true.
Yeah.
And and that sort of brings me to my third point, right? So, a lack of education.
Mm,
So, for starters, we are not educated on mental health issues from the time we're little. I personally first heard about mental health conditions when I was a high schooler. Um, no one really taught me how to manage my feelings and emotions, how to talk about them, how
mhm.
some thoughts were okay, how some thoughts might be harmful, like not a zilch. Like
Yeah.
I didn't learn those things. And so the idea that we don't teach our children about mental health is already just problematic. Um,
Sure.
but two, our understanding of mental health is similar to that seen on TV. So you have a white therapist typically with a pen and a paper, and you have someone lying down on the couch. And Delisha, have you ever gone to therapy?
Yes, I have. I have.
Okay. And I have too. And was this an experience for you to lay down on the couch while you just cried and
No.
told your story? Right.
No, I thought it was something super dramatic and emotional. I was gonna be crying, and that's
Right.
never happened to me.
Exactly. And that's not saying that it can't happen, but that's
Yeah.
but that's the only image that we're ever being shown
Mhm.
in the media. And so there's this idea that going to a therapist, they're just going to listen to you talk and they're going to tell you everything that's wrong with you, and I'm here to tell you that that ain't it, because people of color have they have a very little understanding of what a therapist is, what going to therapy means, why
Mhm.
they should go to therapy in the first place, because there's so many their ideas of these things have been so clouded for years and years, by everything that I just mentioned. So, I mean, even to this day, and this is a little personal, but my boyfriend who's Liberian, when
Mhm.
I mention therapy, his first response is, "Oh, that's a white person thing."
Mm.
Um, as if it's only for one specific group of people. So,
Right.
it's
Wow.
that's a lot. There's a lot of stigmas, and I'm sure you probably have some of your own that you've probably grown up with. I'm
Of
sure
course.
our listeners have a few too. So, if that's true, then you should comment down below and let us know. Um, but Delitra, I know that you have the scoop on the challenges that people face in regards to mental health challenges.
Right.
So I'm gonna
Yeah.
give the mic to you.
So let's try to unpack, like, a lot of this, 'cause I found a lot, of course, I know from being a person of color, but I've also done my research. I thought it was important to note that, the different challenges, unique challenges that, people of color, Black, Indigenous, Asian, Latinx, everybody, um, can experience, mentally. So the established barriers for us, the first one, very important, racism and discrimination. Like,
Mhm.
there's the daily racism that we encounter can result in lasting trauma. A lot of people of color experience PTSD,
Mhm.
poor self-image. If you're always being told that you're wrong, or you look wrong, or you speak wrong, you can start to feel bad about yourself. Um, Also, I want to note that in some instances, issues that affect white people are handled more seriously and carefully than those issues that affect people of color. An
Okay.
example of that is how America has handled the opioid epidemic versus the crack epidemic in the 80s. So,
Girl.
as we see with the opioids, It's very white, middle
Yeah.
to upper class people. The crack epidemic was affecting a lot of Black and brown poor people.
Right.
And what did they do? They locked them up. They weren't giving help and these billboards and using the overdose medication to save them. That wasn't happening. And of course, the people that are struggling with opioids, they need help too, but they are not more important than the people of color that suffered from the crack epidemic.
Exactly.
Um, so, speaking of that, it's also noted that people of color are overrepresented in the criminal justice system. So, statistics show that over 50% of those incarcerated have mental health concerns. And typically, the mental health treatment in jails and prisons are the quality of care is low and it's not funded appropriately enough. Um, so not to mention also how, usually people that have substance abuse problems, the first line of defense is to lock them up rather
Mhm.
than give them rehabilitation services, counseling, whatever. And guess who they're locking up more for this? People of color.
Right.
So that's my little soapbox on that part. I could talk about that for hours.
Right,
Um,
yeah. But it's
another,
important.
yeah, it is. I mean, we're the most affected when it comes to those problems that are huge mental health stressors. Another issue is we have a greater vulnerability to being underinsured or uninsured. So, uninsured, of course, you don't have any health insurance. Underinsured, meaning you don't have enough access to mental health services. So, you got a little bit of insurance, or your insurance doesn't cover that.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, Also, access barriers. So, where you may live in a rural area, so you don't have access. Again, it's harder to access a mental health professional. Communication and language barriers. So, those who speak English as a second language, also nonverbal communication. Like some different cultures, they perceive nonverbal communications in a different way.
Mhm.
Um, and that's not, a lot of times, it's not respected when they're receiving treatment.
Right.
Another huge thing is fear and mistrust of treatment. So we have history of where medical professionals have violated us.
Right.
So Tuskegee experiments,
Dang.
um, Henrietta Lacks and the use of her cells, the gynecological trials on Black women without anesthesia. There's so much more.
Yeah,
This is
there's a
one of the
lot.
most popular ones. So someone might be afraid that they may become an experiment or be violated.
Yeah, right.
Um, Another thing to note is the different cultural perceptions about mental illness. And Angela was kind of referencing that when she was talking about religion and how they perceive mental illness. Um,
Yes.
Also, help seeking behavior. So, the way that different cultures look for help, and what they considered well being, like what it means to be well. So, usually there's not a one size fits all prescription. And this is especially true in the communities of color.
Mhm.
Another thing is the origins of psychotherapy. So, it was reported that mainstream psychotherapy in America has its roots in Western Europe. So going back to what you said about your boyfriend being from Liberia, is that correct?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So Africa versus Europe, totally different. And I can see how they could
Yes.
say, oh, that's for white people
Right.
because that's where their roots are. Um, Another thing I want to mention is that's important is people of color are less frequent to be included in research for mental health. So this can also relate to mistrust, but the problem here is that data is not captured to improve services for people of color. And they're not able to develop greater strategies to combat stigma and other unique challenges that I just mentioned.
Okay.
And the
I
last thing I
never
want
knew
to know
about
is, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, I just never knew about the research. Well, I mean, it doesn't it's not surprising. I just didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's seen pretty often that especially Black people are not included in research studies. And that can really be said about a lot of research studies, not just mental health.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of times it includes white people. And then when you see that, it's hard to generalize the results to a wide group of people.
Okay.
It's more relevant to the people that they were working with. So the white group in Minnesota or whatever. So it's hard to generalize that to everybody.
Okay.
Last thing I
Yeah.
want to know is the mistreatment of providers. So I'm noticing now in social media, like the discussions that we're having about how medical providers can mistreat people of color. So they can brush off your concerns, deny treatment, they can gaslight you, they
Mhm.
can, say, "Are you really sure that happened?" Or um, laugh at what you've reported.
Right.
They could also refuse to treat what you report is really happening because they don't believe that. Angela, have you heard about this discussion now about, like Black women dying through childbirth and, the doctor's not really listening to what they're talking about?
Yeah, well, so I think it was, like, maybe a year ago was when I first saw that Black women are dying at a higher rate than their, white counterparts,
Yeah.
especially, as it relates to, like, pregnancies and things, and
Mhm.
I didn't know that. I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't had a social media account, to be honest, but, I mean, let's be honest, so and
Yeah.
it's crazy because now there's so much information on it, but it's like, well, how come we're just now finding out about this? Like, what's going on, and why is it now all of a sudden, like, a huge thing?
Well, I think more people are speaking now and they have a platform. And sometimes you don't, even though we experience racism on a daily basis, really. And
Yeah.
sometimes I'll speak for myself, it's hard to know. It's like, was that racist or was that person just like a jerk?
Yeah.
And I've had experiences with medical professionals, not all of them, where like, we're arguing at the visit
Wow, okay.
because it's like, okay, I know you should be doing this and you're trying to do this. So we're not going to do that today.
Okay.
No, we're going to do it because you have to do it. No, I don't have to do anything actually.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
they try to some they try to use their position to make it seem like you're inferior or you don't know about, what is good for your health or um, I'll report as this way and they're like, no, it should be that way. And then we're kind of having like a spar.
Yeah.
I hate to admit that. Like there's been times where um I've done that and I have to say that those providers were not people of color.
Mhm.
So it's hard to for me personally, I'm like, dang, was that racist? Were they sexist or
Mhm.
were they just arrogant. Um, but me putting the pieces together of all the different stories, like it happens more often than people think. And to me, it seems like it's really skewing towards racism
Okay.
and discrimination.
Right.
So, we can talk about that for a different topic, but that that leads me to, to highlight the importance of the concept of culturally competent care. So if
Yeah.
you haven't heard about that, what that is, or you've heard of it and you don't know what it is, the American Hospital Association describes cultural competency um, as the ability of systems to provide care to patients with diverse values, beliefs, and behaviors, including the tailoring of healthcare delivery to meet patients' social, cultural, and linguistic needs.
Mhm.
So remember I was talking about like how, it's not a one size fits all prescription and you really need someone that's going to consider all of those factors. I talked about a lot of challenges and I'm sure there's more out there, but they
Mhm.
have to consider all of that when they're talking to you. And one thing that I found was interesting, a statistic, was that there is approximately 86% of psychologists are white, and less than 2% are African American. This is according to the American Psychological Association.
Really?
That is a very um, significant number.
Yes.
So, like, um, and that there can be some white psychologists that consider all those things, and that's great. But I find more than often that they're not thinking about, all the different intricacies and challenges that we deal with. So it was part of that. One thing that happens is there's conscious or unconscious bias from
Yes.
providers, and their lack of cultural competence can result in misdiagnosis, inadequate treatment, and cause you to mistrust mental health professionals overall. One thing that was alarming to me was they found that Black men are overdiagnosed with schizophrenia, 4 times more likely than white men to be diagnosed, while
What?
they're underdiagnosed with post traumatic stress disorders and mood disorders. Now we know they need to be probably diagnosed more often with that, dealing with the trauma
Right.
and, the racism and discrimination that they deal with on a daily basis. Another last thing I wanna note is that, it was reported that African Americans and Latinx communities may be more likely to identify and describe physical symptoms related to mental health problems. For example, they can describe bodily aches and pains when they're talking about depression. And a mental health professional that's not culturally competent might not recognize these symptoms as a mental health condition. So they're not even picking up on that. They're like, oh, they have the flu or they have a headache or something like that. When really it could be something deeper than that.
Right.
Yeah.
I I never knew that about the schizophrenia. That is insane. I
Isn't it?
wow.
It's like,
Wow.
wow, going to the wrong mental health professional can have you misdiagnosed on some medication that you don't need to be on and having potentially an image about yourself that you don't even really identify with.
Right.
So you have a different life
That's
now, possibly.
yeah, a very different life. I imagine the schizophrenia, the medicine you take for that isn't just some, like, mild,
Right.
medication. I mean, I'm sure
Strong stuff.
that's altering your state of mind there.
Yep, your brain chemistry. Um,
That's whew.
yeah, it's crazy. Let me get off my soapbox. Angela, what are your thoughts? Because I know I had a lot for us to digest. There's so much out there,
Yeah.
on cultural competency in the mental health field. Like, what do you think?
So I have some thoughts. And, I mean, I
Yeah.
think the first question that arises, and I think you spoke a little bit on it too, is like, what does it mean to incorporate cultural competency in the healthcare field, right?
Mhm.
And there
Yeah.
were 4 main things that I sort of, that jumped out to me. So, the first one is setting up clinics in more geographical locations, right? And you spoke a little bit about
Mm.
that too, but,
Yeah, access.
um, like last week we talked about food swamps and food deserts, and now we're talking about therapy, and it's kind of all coming together. It's like, well, where the heck are the therapy
Yeah.
centers? I mean,
Mhm.
I don't even know where they are, and I live in a pretty like, not a high socioeconomic status, but it's, like median maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, develop.
So so for me to not even know where my therapy centers are, I can't imagine somebody who might not be in the same position as me, who, where would they go?
Right. Yeah.
Um, and then along with, setting up these clinics is expanding the hours of the operation, right? So
Mm.
that's tough because I know everybody wants those good hours. Everybody wants that, 8 to 4, 9 to 5. Those are good hours for
Yeah.
a lot of people. But we need
Mhm.
to start broadening our approach, right? Because
True.
not everybody works a 9 to 5. Not
Yeah.
everybody can go to appointments from 9 to 5 without taking off
Mhm.
from work or, getting a babysitter, whatever have you.
Yeah.
Um, so that was interesting. I would have never thought about that. Um, and then another one was, providing the linguistic competency and the interpreter services, which you kind of touched on a little bit. Um,
Yeah,
but
we greatly need that.
yes, and the
Yeah.
fourth one was basically recruiting and maintaining minority staff
Mm.
and providing training for staff about cultural awareness, cultural knowledge, and skills and things, which
Yeah.
I think when people think training at work, they're like, "Oh god." And it's a little true, right? I mean, for any
Yeah.
training, it's like, "Here we go, another PowerPoint,"
Yeah.
but it's important because I would beg I would beg the question to a lot of therapists, do you get training? Like, you go to school and
Mm.
you become a therapist, and then while you're working, it's like, is there ongoing training for you?
Mhm.
As far as, as it relates to cultural competency, my
Yeah.
guess would be no, but that's just me making an assumption. So, um, and but let's be honest for a minute because and you touched on it too. I mean,
Mhm.
when I see somebody that looks like me and they quote unquote made it, girl. I mean,
Yeah.
to see an educated black woman as a
Yeah.
therapist, it's
Yeah.
like yes, queen. I'm snapping
Yes. Yes.
because and I imagine it's that way for other people. I imagine it's that way
Mhm.
for Asians and for Latinos and things like that. But um,
Right.
and I mean, it's the reason why we wanted to have a black Spider-Man, right? Because we want to see the
Yeah.
profession as a reflection of the world that we live in. And
Right.
you touched on the discrepancy between how many white people are in the field versus black people, and that's a little, well, one, it's a little scary that that's still a thing in 2020, um
Right.
but we have to fight those barriers. We need to see more people um that look like us that are in the field. um
Of course.
and I mean, and you touched on, the language barriers and the cultural and the religious barriers, but I would say for me personally, um as I wanted somebody that I could relate to, right? So as an
Mhm.
interracial adoptee, um,
Mhm.
I can't tell you how long I searched and searched for someone who specialized in adoption because I
Hmm.
knew that they could either A, relate, or they could at least understand and empathize with what I needed them to. Um, so, and you have to understand that it's all about building rapport and wanting to have a connection with your provider because why would I waste
Mhm.
my time with someone who I barely like? Like you said, it was like, I'm not trying to fight my therapist.
Okay.
Like this isn't like a cash me outside. Like,
How about that?
no, I'm going to you because I need help.
Yeah. Yeah. Someone that can really understand you. I didn't even think about, like, adoption being, like, a unique thing, like, someone with experience with that experience being a unique thing that you would look for in a provider. Wow,
Right.
that's not something I considered.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, and so I think that's the thing for a lot of people. I mean, when we talk about incorporating cultural competency, we just need to fight these barriers because we need more of people of color in this field. We need more people of color that are attending sessions with therapists. We need to educate them more. I mean, there's just so many things.
Yeah. Yeah, and we need our allies too. We need y'all too.
I
we need,
know.
we need y'all to learn, listen, support. You know, you're a part of this as well.
Yes.
Yeah, we
Yes,
need.
learn first, but oh,
Jump in
man.
there.
Lord. But okay, so you have some tips for our listeners. So, what are
Yeah,
these tips?
and I forgot to say, obviously, we're not mental health professionals, so
Yes.
a lot of the stuff, we've researched, and I found some tips to sustain or maintain your mental health. The first one, which I really love, is to take a mental health day or break. That's my thing. Like, I take time off work to do this. I get overwhelmed when I'm doing a lot of tasks, or maybe I'm just overworking myself or getting burned out. It's often necessary to take a break, or if you can afford it, a day to just de-stress. Like, you'd be surprised how much good that would do for you. Another
Yes.
tip is to get enough sleep. So you may be familiar with the recommendation, which is 7 to 9 hours is the recommended time frame for adults. I don't know about other people, but when I haven't gotten enough sleep, I am not good. I'm no good. I am irritated. I
Uh-huh.
I feel off balanced.
Yeah, you being real nice to yourself because irritated is not the word not the word I would use.
I'm more than irritated. I just feel different. Like, sleeping is my jam, and when I don't get enough, I'm just not enough for
Right. But
for
you
any.
do you get 7 to 9 hours?
I do, actually.
Dang, that's
I
real
really
nice.
do. And I know other people struggle with that, and I sympathize with you guys, but I get my sleep. I'm like, okay, I need to wake up at this time, so I need to go to bed at this time. Like, I schedule it out. I make sure I'm getting enough sleep.
Listen, for all the listeners, Deletri ain't got no kids.
That's true. It's just me and my hubby. It's just me and mines. We got a cat, and she tries to wake us up at like
Right,
6 a.m., but I ain't getting up for her.
right. Oh,
Yeah.
boy.
So blessings to those that have, you know, um, outside or extra responsibilities that stop you from doing that. We're going to talk about sleep. That's going to be one of our episodes.
Yeah, we are.
Another tip is to move your body. So, physical activity is known to boost your self esteem, even if it's not about like losing weight. You just feel good exercising. Like, you have an improved self image. Like, if you're doing something that you like, not anything that you hate to do.
Yeah.
Um, it can also improve your sleep. So if you guys haven't been doing that and you're having sleep issues, think about doing that. And it can also help you concentrate. Another tip is to eat a well balanced diet. So, we're
Hmm,
nutritionists people. So, of course, we're going to talk about this: our fruits, vegetables, whole grains, lean meats, nuts and seeds, water, drinking water. A balanced diet has been reported to affect mood regulating brain chemicals.
okay.
So, eating good does so much for us. One
Yes.
thing that's important to do is to avoid drugs and alcohol. So clearly drugs are illegal. Some people still have access to them. But alcohol is legal and available for those who are 21 and up. And some people use alcohol and drugs to numb the pain.
Yeah.
And usually um, consuming these items, especially alcohol in excess, can make your problems worse. So you can become addicted, you can engage in risky behaviors, you could potentially die from
Oh,
an overdose,
yep.
or acquire alcohol poisoning, and they're gonna have to pump out your stomach. So, kind of making your life worse than, what you started with.
Yeah.
Um, Another good thing is to find some healthy coping methods. So all of us, we got issues, we got stuff going on. It's really, a lot of times it's about how we deal with those problems. So you can engage in meditation, prayer if you're religious, laughing can do so much good for you. Um, and having fun, like doing fun things that can improve your mood. Another tip is to surround yourself with a great support system. And I know this is really hard now with social distancing, COVID 19. But there's still ways that we can reach out to people. So you can call somebody, do a little FaceTime, you can send a DM or a message. Angela and I send stuff through Instagram DMs all the time.
Right.
Um, so you can talk to someone about what you're going through or to get your mind off of something, like a little distraction for you.
Right.
Um, but I do want to note that your friends and your family cannot be your everything. So if you're always turning to them with your problems all the time, uh, more than like, I guess what's the average, other than every now and again, girl, I'm having issues.
Mhm.
Um, really rely on them, you will burn them out.
Yes.
And they're not gonna want to have anything to do with you. Like they're gonna stop answering your calls because then they got stressed now trying to help you out with your problems.
Yeah.
And they don't have all the answers to your problem. They can only tell you so much.
Mhm.
So that's when it is important to seek out a professional to speak to them about your problems, about the issues that you're experiencing. They have, set up time to talk to you. They're paid to listen to you. They
Right.
don't have no stake in your life and you're not going to be overburdening them with your problems. That's what they're there for. Um and speaking of that, Angela, I know you have some resources where our listeners can find help that they need.
Yes. So I have a lot. So the first thing that I'm going to say, social media is your best friend.
Yeah.
There are so many people on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, shoot, like every social media account you could ever imagine, right? Um,
Yeah.
I mean, and I know like the three that I follow, and I'm probably going to butcher their names, so I'm so sorry, but Dr. Thema, Dr. Marielle Bouquet, Dr. Barbara Shabazz. I mean, these are just a few people, but
Mhm.
honestly, I would say to all of our listeners, take the time to scroll through the hashtags, the accounts.
Mm.
You'll find so many resources just from one singular app. Um, and I would say Pinterest. Pinterest is really great too. I mean, sometimes all you have to do is just type in like mental health or depression or whatever it is you're looking for, and it'll just come up with like a laundry list of resources, which are then linked to professionals in the field. So, I mean, social media is your best friend.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
But I would say right, but I would say that there are a lot of websites, right? And I kind of broke it down I kind of looked some up for Black people. I looked some up for some immigrants, for Asian, for Latinos. So I will kind of break it down a little bit. There are a lot, so I probably haven't even listed all of them, but so, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, which is where I kind of got some of my research from, that's a really good one to use. That's NAMI.org, I believe. Um, there's Melanin and Mental Health. There's Therapy for Black Girls, and these are all kind of databases that provide you with, contact names and things that you can kind of go and look up providers for yourself. Um, you've got actress, so Taraji P. Henson, yes, girl.
What?
She founded the Boris Lawrence Henson Foundation in 2018.
Yeah.
It was to honor her father who struggled with like PTSD and things, and um, So again, that's a foundation that helps to increase mental health care access. You have Black Emotional and Mental Health Collective.
Mm.
That's a group that kind of advocates for a number of things, not just therapists. And basically, in their words, they say it's a world where there are no barriers to Black healing.
I like
Um,
that.
I know, right? Then you've got the National Queer and Trans Therapist of Color Network, which, yes, that's important
Yeah,
too.
need that.
Um, and then you've got one that was created by a pretty well known academic and writer and lecturer, Rachel Cargill. Cargel. I hope I'm pronouncing her name right. I'm so sorry, Rachel. But she created the Loveland Therapy Fund, which is a nonprofit organization that helps to defray the cost of therapy for Black women and girls. So,
Ooh,
yes, girl.
yeah.
Um, then for, other groups of people, we have supporting mental health of immigrant communities, lots of
Mhm.
database that you can use. We have the National Alliance for Hispanic Health. We have We Are Native, that's for young Native youth and which promotes like holistic health and things. You
Nice.
have One Sky Center, which is an American Indian slash like Alaska Native resource for health and education. You have Indigenous Story Studio, which creates like illustrations and posters and things for health and social issues for the youth. You have Strength of the Sash and Tomorrow's Hope. That's suicide prevention. Um, you have Making It Right and Just a Story. These are kind of things that help to break down like mental health stigmas. Um, you have the National Asian American Pacific Islander Mental Health Association. Woo, that's a long one.
Yeah.
You have SouthAsianTherapist.org. You have Asian Mental Health Collective. So these are just a few of the ones that I found. There are literally probably a million more out there.
Yeah.
So if any of our viewers know any of any great ones that maybe they utilize or that they've heard people utilize, go ahead and drop them in our comments section.
Yeah, let us know. I didn't know about half of that stuff.
Me
Those
neither.
resources, that's amazing.
Yeah, it was a little bit of shock to my system when I saw it because it's like, wait a minute, how come I didn't know about this? Here I am just like living life, trying to find a
Right,
therapist, and
right.
they're all right there.
I'm yeah, I'm, like, in my provider directory for my health insurance, like, copy and pasting the names into Google to see if I can find a picture or a profile or something like that,
Right.
and we have these directories already available for us. The Internet's amazing. It's an amazing
Yes. Yeah.
invention.
It definitely is. I mean, it can be scary at times,
Yeah.
but I think it's definitely and I can't wait to see what the future looks like, but I think it's
Mm.
been incredibly powerful um because it
Oh,
connects groups of people, it connects you from every, social background. So,
right? Yeah.
yeah,
We're blessed. We're lucky.
we are. So I would say that, we talked about a lot of things, and Deletria and I both appreciate all of you for listening. Um,
Yes.
Therapy, as it pertains to people of color, is such a heavy topic. I mean, there's probably so many more things that we could have talked about. There's so much involved. We could probably do another whole episode on it.
Yeah,
Um,
we could.
but I would say that if you are struggling with something, whether it be emotionally or mentally, we do encourage that you seek out the appropriate resources. Um, there are so many that exist, and you don't have to suffer in silence. So,
Mhm.
seeking help for a mental health condition is normal, and it's perfectly okay. Um, Deletria and I wish you all the best. And as always, help us spread the word by following us on social media, liking our content, reposting it. And we're always here to chat if you guys want to directly message us as well. So thanks for the support and stay safe. Bye.